There's a version of everything is fine that shows up in a lot of marriages. Bills are getting paid, accounts are growing, no one's arguing about money, and on the surface, it looks like success. But underneath, there's often something else that's happening. I see this all the time in my financial planning practice. One person knows everything, and the other knows almost nothing. And neither of them is acknowledging it out loud. And I think a good way to describe this is that it's an illusion of harmony. A lack of financial conflict is often mistaken for financial alignment. But silence isn't alignment, it's avoidance. And in a lot of households that I work with, one spouse just naturally takes the lead on the finances. They might enjoy it, or it might just be that they understand it really well. Sometimes they even work in that field. And then it's natural for the other spouse to just step back. It's not like they don't care, but they might feel overwhelmed, or they might feel it's just unnecessary because the other person's got it. And, they're married. They trust them to take care of it. They can focus on something else, divide and conquer. So an agreement forms between them, and it may not have ever been explicitly stated, but it's basically, you handle this. And that can actually really work well for a long time, but it could also unravel really quickly if things aren't handled properly. So if you're the financially oriented one, it could actually feel like you're doing your spouse a favor. You're taking something that might be complex to them or just a burden, and it's off their plate. But what you're also doing is that you're concentrating all the knowledge and the risk into just you. And it's not really simplification, it's fragility, because it's not like your spouse is uninvolved, they're unprepared. And that gap doesn't usually show up when markets are calm or income is steady. But when something goes wrong, it can certainly show up. So consider this. What happens if you die? And not like someday in the future, like really, what would happen if it was next year or next month? Would your spouse know where your accounts are held, how to access them, what income is coming in and from where, who to call for help, and maybe what decisions not to make when you're in a moment of high stress? Or would they just be left piecing together the financial life that they were never fully integrated in? Grief is hard enough on its own. But if you layer the confusion of having to deal with all this on top of that, it becomes way more challenging. And in my experience, the most difficult situations that I've seen weren't caused by bad investments. They're caused by good intentions and then poor communication. A spouse or even an heir that was suddenly forced into a world they don't understand. They can't access things. The accounts may not be properly accounted for. They don't even know what they own. The strategy behind what they're doing is unclear. And it might delay them from making an important decision, or they might get flustered and just rush to get it done. And then there's the psychological element underneath. There could be a simmering feeling of resentment because their partner handled the finances and they were never brought into the process. And I think most people, when you think about talking about finances, they picture sitting down at the kitchen table with charts, numbers, projections on their computer screen. And I don't think that's where you should start. You got to start with some context. Like, what are we trying to accomplish as a family? And what does enough look like for us? What are we actually worried about? And what decisions have already been made and why? And the goal isn't to turn your spouse into some kind of financial expert, but they should at least be a participant. So if you're confused about where to go with this information, here's a simple test. If your spouse had to take over everything tomorrow, could they? And I don't mean like they're perfect at it and they don't have to have supreme confidence, but could they competently take care of it? And if the answer is no, then there's work to do. And this doesn't require this big dramatic overhaul of everything that you do, but it does require some consistency. So a quarterly money meeting with no distractions at all, or having some kind of shared document that lists accounts and advisors and key contacts, taking the time to walk through your financial plan together, not just lecturing or presenting the information, and then giving your spouse some space to ask questions without feeling like they're doing something wrong or creating an aura of shame. And also, I think it's really important to explain your thinking, because knowing what you did doesn't matter as much as understanding why you did it. Understanding why will help them make better decisions in the future if they have to. And I mentioned this just a little bit before, but it's a huge source of risk. It's a single point of failure in one person, that person holding all the knowledge, making all the decisions, carrying the entire load. It's not really strategy, it's a vulnerability. So if you're not communicating with your spouse about finances, I don't think you're preserving harmony. You're creating some distance. And it might be invisible today, but over time, it can become a real wedge. And if life forces the issue, it could become a crisis. So the goal isn't perfection, it's partnership. And strong financial plans aren't just built well, but they're genuinely shared.